new phase of Deadrop founders testing has opened up, and I am among the founders and variants who spent 6 hours playing and testing new development build of Deadrop, which has changed everything. In some ways, the Deadrop that we knew is gone, replaced by something that's deeper and obviously further along in development, and it shows. What we are playing and testing now represents the biggest leap forward that Deadrop has ever taken. All the bones and systems of what will likely be the early access version of Deadrop are here, and that's a very good thing. Let's talk about my first impressions of the new build, my thoughts on what feels good, what needs to be changed and refined. So first, let me explain the new gameplay loop that Deadrop features, at least in this build. Players have the choice of playing as a claw or a rat, which I hate that name by the way. Rat, just don't like it. Anyway, claws are your traditional human character, can equip armor, armor plates, heal, extract items, complete contracts, and so on. They're kind of your main character. Rats are robotic units that move a little faster, can do a little bit more parkour, and spawn in with randomized weapon loadouts, free of charge, so to speak. You don't need to take gear in, you don't risk anything, you just spawn in and you got random loadouts. It's risk-free from the gear and equipment standpoint, but in exchange, your robotic unit has a limited battery, which can be replaced during the match multiple times as long as you keep finding batteries. Right now, you spawn in with 3 batteries by default. You can find more in the environment or kill other rats to get more batteries. You also have less health as a rat, no armor, and you can't actually take the gear that you extract with you. What you get for playing as a rat is the dust value of the items that you found and extracted. You can then turn around and use that dust to buy guns, armor, equipment, and contracts for your claw, which, like I said, is kind of like your main character. Based on my experience so far, if your claw has absolutely no gear at all, you're probably going to need at least 3 to 4 successful rat runs to fully gear up your claw to sufficient levels for a raid. With that said, you can try to 0 to hero as your claw if you really want to. I imagine that'll be a contract at some point, but for the most part, you're going to want at least, a primary weapon and a helmet, some armor before you go in. Deadrop also now has built-in progression systems. All players can take on quests, which yield account experience, which are kind of like challenges in a battle royale game. They're just there when you log in, period, and you just get your account XP. The game also has contracts that are one-time tasks to perform X, Y, or Z objective during your raid as a claw. These contracts yield dust and other rewards. There are also now 2 different vendors that you can gain reputation with and level up for better stock in their shops and equipment for a better selection and choice of weapons and gear. So again, the idea is, since we last played Deadrop, a lot more to do, a lot more reasons to play, challenges to keep going. When you first spawn into a match of Deadrop in this Founders Test build, the first thing you're going to notice is that the game's art and visuals have jumped forward tremendously. Atrium, which was formerly Proving Ground 2 in the old snapshots, has slick new visuals that make it feel like an actual map with that nighttime cyberpunk vibe that Deadrop is going for. It looks great and really brings the world of Deadrop to life. The Founders Test build is not optimized for performance, so there's plenty of frame drops and screen tearing, but that's to be expected when you're playing a closed test of a development build and not a public release. The early access version of Deadrop will obviously run much better when it releases in 2025. It's also worth noting that the bones of Atrium are clearly what we played in Proving Ground 2, but it feels like an entirely new map. There's new pieces of cover, entirely new sections, new methods of traversal connecting one area to the next. It just feels like a real extraction shooter map with tons of verticality. There's even new extraction methods like the sky tram, tubes, garbage chutes, manholes, and a truck that most people haven't discovered, as well as a sector shutdown mechanic and motion detecting cameras, which were introduced in the TDM Founders Test, which, if you run through them, mark the player on the map for everybody to see. Now let's talk about how the game actually feels to play with all these new gameplay systems implemented. If you're someone who's played Deadrop in the past, you will likely feel the game has slowed down because, well, it has. You no longer have multiple lives per raid, rats can die extremely fast, and the full extraction shooter gameplay loop of wanting to build up your stash and dust balance is in effect. The focus has been shifted to getting in, getting gear, getting items, and extracting. That means not dying. In my experience this weekend at least, that seemed to lead to less fighting than the traditional Deadrop matches of the past may have featured before, which played a little bit like a battle royale with extraction elements. Momentum has shifted heavily in the extraction direction from a game design perspective. All the same gameplay options are still there for, movement and parkour. You still move quite fast, especially as a rat. grab zip lines, ledges, slide down hills and stairs, slide down pipes on the run, climb up them if you're a rat, etc. But because the objective, so to speak, has shifted more towards extraction, the game as a whole feels a little more averse to taking risks, since you can no longer just get a second or third shot like you could with your Sin in the old snapshots of Deadrop and potentially get your stuff back. If you die, you go back to the lobby, period. Unless you're playing as a Claw and you use one of the Sin stations on the map in exchange for 2 batteries, which I haven't actually done yet, but it's possible. You can kind of buy yourself a respawn. I don't think a lot of players are utilizing this yet, but I expect it to become an important feature in the future. Different people will have varying opinions of this. Some people felt that Deadrop stood out from other extraction shooters because it allowed for so much riskier gameplay. Others who are fans of more traditional extraction shooters like Tarkov probably like the slower paced, more tense or stealth-oriented gameplay if you choose to play that way. The game is still very clearly Deadrop, as I said before, with all the same movement features and tech and so on, but it's the actual objectives and rules of the mode, so to speak, that are going to shift players away from some of the riskier, high-flying gameplay that we may be accustomed to, in my opinion. In time, as players get more comfortable on the map and with the update and so on, we may see that change with players taking on more risks, but only time will tell. That brings us to the rat gameplay, which is my biggest critique of this build. Bearing in mind that none of this is final and everything in this build is still being expanded and refined, I don't find the current rat gameplay loop to be very satisfying. As of now, rats are very fragile and can be killed in 1 or 2 shots with many weapons. Rats by definition join matches in progress, which I do think is a great idea in general, as it will be very quick to just get into the game and play without having to think or stress. But rats die so quickly that it feels like combat should basically be avoided at all costs, which I'm not really a huge fan of. Furthermore, extracting with items only to receive dust in exchange kind of makes this pair even worse. If I was running around and having fun fragging out as a rat, I don't think I would care so much about only getting dust and not gear because I'm just having fun. But because rats die so quickly, you basically have to actually rat it out, just avoid fighting, grab a few items for dust, extract and repeat the process a few times to then play your claw, right? I understand that the purpose of this is to gear your claw, which is really your main objective, and once you build up a stash as your claw, you'll not really need to use your rat much at all unless you want to or have objectives to do so or whatever. But I still feel that the rat experience as a whole right now doesn't feel super rewarding or entertaining. I think giving rats who have health regen a small health boost or something really fun, like maybe removing their fall damage altogether, since they're robots, would create something fun and like more interesting gameplay that would make playing a rat feel really unique and more thrilling. You know, you're trying not to die, you're running around like crazy, and you just launch yourself, and land somewhere, and you can just that crazy like rat running feeling. It might be interesting. The gunplay feels virtually identical to the way it did in the most recent Founders Test TDM build, which isn't too crazily different than the Snapshot 7.5 gunplay. Certain guns feel better and others feel worse. One thing that I will say is I think that the way the gunplay feels right now as a whole isn't being helped by the current performance change. With that said, Deadrop's weapon pool has drastically expanded since Snapshot 7, with new weapons being added in virtually all classes. We've got new shotguns, pistols, rifles, DMRs, silenced weapons, you name it. Some of them with some really cool alternate fire modes like bayonets and axe underbarrels like we showed in the last round of Founders tests. There's still a ton of room to expand the weapon sandbox, but it does feel appropriately expanded since we last played in Snapshot 7. If you haven't been following closely, Deadrop now has different rarities of weapons that can be found and purchased from vendors with RPG-like color systems, guiding weapons up from common to rare, epic, and legendary. I haven't got to use the legendaries yet. This obviously makes some weapons more potent and more valuable. What I think will be interesting to watch and will obviously affect the loot economy and gameplay loop as a whole is how the marketplace is implemented. Assuming that 12am is still planning on having an in-game marketplace where items can be bought, sold, and traded, that certainly changes the level of tension and importance in extracting with certain items because you may be able to sell it in the marketplace, much like Off the Grid is doing right now. Check out my video on Off the Grid on this channel, by the way. While there's no news or information on how that might work, it's something to keep in mind when you're playing this test build or watching it on stream, twitch.tv/MayorReynolds. That's a whole element of the game that we aren't seeing yet. And while this is 100% speculation, this may affect how densely Deadrop maps can or can't be packed with loot. It's something that 12am will have to keep in mind and balance so to not destroy the economy and marketplace of the game. The sound design of the game remains similar to previous Deadrop builds and is still very obviously incomplete. There's some cool new additions here, like new cleaner audio, which was like a barking dog, which I really loved, to new types of cleaners altogether, puddles that make a splash sound, revealing players who walk through them. Love that, great touch, reminded me of something like Hunt Showdown, but distant gunfire seems to be a bit muddier. This may have to do with the fact that gunfire in old builds was sometimes overpoweringly loud, so some tweaking and balance is still needed there, I think. Like I said, it's still in development. I did hear a new bit of music, which felt very cyberpunk though, and I definitely loved. And before I forget about the cleaners, they're obviously improved vastly since Snapshot 7. Not only are there new types of cleaners in this test build, but I actually witnessed cleaners picking up loot bags and running around with them to avoid a fight or being caught in the open, which is really cool to witness. Their AI has obviously got a lot better, with their behavior being less predictable. And they also seem to be more of a threat as well. You can't just dance around them or ignore them anymore. They can really drop. Speaking quickly to the game's current UI, it's fine. Somebody on Twitch called out that the gun stats, like how many bullets you have and such, are actually part of a UI that's on your gun itself, so it doesn't eat up any more of the screen, which is either really great subtle placement or just coincidence, and it worked out really well. But right now, the biggest problem the UI has, which I like as a whole, I didn't notice anything egregious, except there's bits of intel that pop up dead center on your screen and invade the player's view when you're playing. This should be an easy one to fix by just putting it somewhere else on the screen when it pops up, or making it less invasive to the actual gameplay. With all this in mind, there's still a ton of features to come that aren't represented in the Founders test. I already mentioned the marketplace, but obviously more maps, also called districts, quests, objective, cosmetics, player hideout, battle pass, right? The Midnight Ride car segment, assuming it returns, which it should, by the way, totally, UGC tools, and more. Which is what brings me to my conclusion, which is a positive one. I think if nothing else, the Founders Test build proves that Deadrop has taken a lot of steps forward since Snapshot 7 or 7.5. All the bones of the gameplay systems that the game needs to have its early access launch in 2025 are here. Now that they're in place, refining and polishing them is significantly easier and quicker than designing them from the ground up. There's a lot of things that obviously need work, from performance, the expansion of quests and contracts and progression, rat rework, a little bit, tweaking, I guess, hopefully, maybe, and the other features that I mentioned, like the addition of the player hideout and so on. But the puzzle pieces that make up the VES gameplay loop are here. In my mind, I'm not the game developer, by the way, it feels viable depending on how far along at least one other map is. The Deadrop could legitimately be ready for early access in the spring of 2025. We obviously don't really know how far along the console versions are, and if 12am still intends to launch all versions of the game in early access at the same time or not. Console manufacturers are still a bit weird when it comes to early access, but it feels possible, which is certainly good to see proven in front of us with our own eyes. That said, guys, leave your thoughts on the Deadrop Founders test if you've been playing it or watching it on stream, and be sure to give your feedback to Midnight Society in their Discord. That's crucial. That's what we're doing. We're testing the game, and our feedback enables the developers to make it better, fix issues, etc. It's still in development. It's not a public product yet. It's not alpha even, right? It's not early access. We're playing a closed development build, sharing it with the world, and Midnight Society is going to take our feedback to make it the best that it can be. I'd also like to hear what Deadrop content you'd like to see next on the channel. I'm certainly going to do a Founders Test montage at some point, but I'd love to hear what you guys would like to see next, whether it's based on this Founders Test or something else. Okay? That's it. If you want more Deadrop Midnight Society content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. May Reynolds out. This video is sponsored by G Fuel Energy, a sugar-free energy drink available in both powdered and canned form, and you can get 20% off using code MAYOR at discount. That's just MAYOR, M-A-Y-O-R. Right in checkout, it's going to get you 20% off. There's a ton of good flavors, including this new Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty flavor. If you need a competitive edge, guys, something to keep you up on those late nights, or just get you hyped for whatever the latest release is, look no further than G Fuel Energy and use code MAYOR to get a discount on your order and support my content and channel at the same time.